They say to walk the halls of a Titan is to step inside a god's skeleton, half entombed, half awake, but they never tell you about the smell. Not the sacred incense or the oaths of oil, but the rot in the vents, the blood in the cables. The way the machine spirit screams, not aloud but in your spine, when it's hungry. You feel it first before the link ever touches you. The weight of ancient hate, the pride of victories it still remembers, and the desperate craving for more. More war, more thunder, more blood beneath its tread. Serving inside a Titan isn't service. It's consumption. You are taken in mind first, then muscle, then soul. You call it glory. You call it duty. But deep down, where your own name used to live, something else is breathing with you. Something that once had its own crew, and mourns them. If this is your first time inside the Titan's heart, welcome. And if you've already walked these steel cathedrals in your dreams, then you know what's coming. Like, subscribe, and stay connected. The machine remembers you. They brought me in blindfolded, not out of malice, but reverence. The air was thick with sacred oil and ozone, and the sound of servo motors hummed beneath the deck like a choir breathing in reverse. My boots struck metal grating with a hollow clang, every step echoing deeper than seemed possible. I remember thinking the Titan Bay felt more like a tomb than a hangar, but not a tomb of death, one of containment, as if whatever dwelled here had only been paused, not buried. The voice of Magos Preceptor Hallex droned behind me, intoning the litany of fusion as I was led down the length of glory of Cal. I couldn't see her yet, but I could feel the presence, a pressure behind the forehead, as if being watched by something vast and mechanical. Moderati Initiate Kiros Fen, the Magos intoned. Prepare for First Communion. The servitors peeled the blindfold away. The sight made me stagger. Glory of Cal towered above everything. More than a god of war, she was a cathedral on legs, adorned in burnished armor filigreed with the script of the Omnissiah. Incense drifted from censers chained to her carapace. Her head, designed in the image of a wrathful saint, loomed forward. The optics like smoldering eyes that had seen 10,000 battlefronts and remembered each one. At her feet, the tech adepts worked in silence, performing rites as precise as surgery. One polished the base of the plasma annihilator with a ritual cloth soaked in sanctified promethium. Another chanted to the machine spirit while adjusting coolant feeds. Their robes fluttered slightly in the backdraft of the reactor core cycling up behind me. They led me up the spinal lift, a cage of steel that ascended through the Titan's internal cathedral. I passed stained panels etched with the names of previous crews, some partially burned away by fire or intent. No one spoke. No one smiled. Only the sound of machinery, hissing steam, and sacred verse carried us upward. The command cortex was darker than I expected, lit only by the low pulse of cogitator runes and the holy amber of the link coffin that housed the Princeps. I had seen him before, but never like this. Princeps Valon was suspended in the fluid cradle, neural ports glowing dimly as the machine fed itself into him in pulses. His mouth did not move when he greeted me. "You are late, Kiros?" His voice echoed through the Vox grill mounted in the wall. "The machine waits for no man." I offered a reflexive salute, but the servitor beside me clamped down on my shoulder. This was not a place for Imperial Guard protocol. This was Collegia Titanica. The rules were older, stricter, less human. Larak, my senior Moderati, emerged from his station near the engine's auspex array. "He'll adjust," he said flatly, not looking at me. "Or he won't." I was directed to my seat, if one could call it that. It was a throne with clamps, a web of restraint harnesses, and a halo of neural jacks that hummed softly. I swallowed hard as the Magos moved to insert the primary link spine. My vision doubled from the pressure. The taste of copper filled my mouth as the pin jack fused against the base of my skull. Then came the voice. Not Princeps Valon. Not the Magos. Not Larak. The machine spirit. It didn't speak in words. It spoke in weight, in shape. I could feel the ground where Glory of Cal had last stood. Could feel the tension in her limbs, the restlessness in her core, and something else like memory. Not mine. Every sensation flooded in at once, reactor pulse syncing with my breath. Shield harmonics echoing in my ribcage. Ammunition counts bleeding into my fingertips. Somewhere far away, I could feel the scrape of wind against armor plate, though we hadn't yet moved. I was no longer alone inside my head, but I was not among friends either. Then came the chant, the full crew now engaged. each speaking part of the canticle of activation. The room trembled as Glory of Kal acknowledged her new crew. In that moment, I understood something I had not expected. The Titan accepts nothing. It only absorbs. We trained for this, of course, in theory, in simulators that replicated latency lag and vertigo, in psych conditioning cubes that replayed the sound of reactor startup until it lulled us to sleep. But no one tells you how the Titan truly feels, not until you're inside it, not until your nervous system becomes a strand in something vaster, faster, hungrier. I sat within my station, tethered by rights and flesh both, as Glory of Kal prepared to rise. The servitors hissed prayers in Binaric. Coolant lines shivered. Valan's coffin tilted slightly, his arms flexing in rhythm with the engine's pulse. Larek's gaze met mine for a fraction of a second, unreadable beneath the glow of his cranial implants. He said nothing. There was nothing to say. You either endured the first sink or you didn't. Magos Halix's final words before descent echoed in my skull. Remember this, Kiros Fen. There is no hierarchy inside the God Engine. There is only the will. If it chooses you, serve. If it resists, surrender. The spinal column of the Titan was already sealing behind us. No escape, no disengage. My body vibrated in place as the inertial dampeners activated, syncing our pulse with the stride of the machine. Larek began murmuring Auspex returns. Dry reports of terrain topology, atmospheric pressure, seismic anomalies. Valan, still deep in trance, responded only when needed. But me, I was struggling to keep the world straight. I could still smell the oil, but now it was mixed with ozone and burned hair. I could hear wind buffeting armor, but there was no wind. I could feel the weight of the volcano cannon on our right arm, but also the shiver of anticipation from the machine. It wanted to fire. It didn't care at what, just that it could. My thoughts slowed to the rhythm of hydraulics. My instincts dulled, then sharpened. Time did not behave in the cockpit of a Titan. It stuttered, rewound, surged forward. A moment felt like an hour. A kilometer passed like a blink. In between, I could feel the echo of previous crews, almost like fingerprints on the controls. Hesitation in one spot, confidence in another. Faint but there. I remember looking at my own hands. They weren't trembling, but they didn't feel like mine anymore. Larek snapped me out of it with a shove. "You're drifting," he said. "The machine doesn't like doubt. If you hesitate, we stagger. If we stagger, we fall. And if we fall, we die before we hit the ground." I nodded, though I wasn't sure who I was nodding for. Myself. Him. The Titan. We began movement. Glory of Kal did not walk. She strode, each step a seismic event. The tremor passed through our bones seconds before the inertial compensators could catch up. My head was filled with data now. Terrain maps, threat vectors, range indicators, internal temperatures, spinal load stress. All of it chanted to me in streams of machine code I could now instinctively interpret. I was becoming part of it. And it was already inside me. Our first maneuver was a calibration drill, step pattern, pivot, targeting sweep, reactor cold run, routine. But even the routine felt apocalyptic when performed by something the size of a city block. I could see distant tech priests below, recording every step, every twitch of hydraulics. Glory of Kal was not just a war engine. She was a relic, a legend, a liturgical weapon that required worship to wield. We reached the hangar threshold, and the world outside revealed itself in full. The Titan Bay's blast doors peeled open with a scream of tortured metal. Beyond them, the shattered plain of Bastion 13, a world recently reclaimed from orc warbands. Now quiet, too quiet. Smoke still rose from the bones of broken cities. Piles of corpses arranged by Mechanicus biologists for ritual cataloging. I saw a child's toy half buried in ash. We were not here to comfort. We were here to test stride and sync under live conditions. Valan's voice rasped over the neural link. Engage Auspex feed. Targeting array calibration. Power up tertiary systems. Kiros, you are the weapon. Nothing else matters. The phrase was ritual, but it was also warning. I nodded. I accepted. And the machine did not resist. Not that time. The wind howled across the desolate plateau as we stepped into the gray daylight. The light was wrong, filtered through ash clouds and chemical haze. It painted the world in tones of brass and sickness. A ruined manufactorum lay dead ahead, its spires half collapsed, machinery still twitching as if uncertain it had died. But Glory of Kal moved as if none of it mattered. She had crossed such graveyards before, and would again. We began the stride test. precise left-right cadence across the terrain, rotating torso alignment while maintaining forward momentum. It felt like dancing with tectonic plates. Lara called out the harmonics of the shoulder gyros. I synchronized the calibration for heat bleed from the plasma coils. Our minds no longer needed to speak aloud. The Titan was mediating our thoughts, translating emotion into instinct, instinct into movement, movement into purpose. I felt it. For a moment, a brief, dizzying flicker, I felt what it was like to be Glory of Kal. Not just to ride her, or command her, but to be her. The weight of each step wasn't a burden, it was confidence. The knowledge that nothing beneath you could matter, not really. Roads crumbled, ruins flattened, and the sky bowed under the hum of reactor core ignition. This wasn't just control, it was embodiment. Her optics merged with mine. Her thermal imaging gave me sight through dust. Her rangefinders traced forgotten bullet holes in distant stone. And below it all, her hunger pulsed. A desire not born of rage or purpose, but simple existence. To move was to crush. To exist was to conquer. The Magos preceptor's voice crackled through the Vox chamber once more, observing from afar. Commendable alignment. Neural sync at 84.3%. Praise the Omnissiah. Begin weapons calibration sweep. And then I made the mistake of smiling. It was so small, that twitch of the mouth. So human, but the machine spirit felt it. I don't know how. Something in the tension of my spine, or the slowness of a reaction time. A momentary lapse. An emotion. That was when it whispered. Just a pulse. Like a second heartbeat behind my own. Not words exactly, but the meaning was unmistakable. And it wasn't coming from Valan, nor from Larek. The presence was older, cold and slow like ice forming on bone, and familiar. I blinked. The world blurred for half a second and then snapped back into clarity. Targeting runes began appearing across the heads-up display, ghosts from the past, not present. Names I didn't recognize, engine kill logs decades old, coordinates overlaid with half-burnt icons, memory fragments, something else, impressions residual will. Kairos, Larek snapped, his tone flat but edged with threat. Don't let it pull you. I realized then, he'd heard it too. Not the voice itself, but the hesitation. He didn't say more. He didn't have to. This wasn't the Schola. No instructors here, no second chances. A hesitation in combat could misalign the stride, cause a stutter step, make the Titan fall mid-battle. And if the Titan fell, its crew didn't die quickly. I swallowed the thought. Confirmed, I responded flatly, suppressing every trace of wonder from my tone. I fed more power into the dorsal heat exchange and focused on calibrating the right arm's motion control cluster. The volcano cannon groaned in its housing, as though testing my loyalty. We continued forward into the mock target zone. Dummy targets rose from the gray ash, rusted tank hulks, shattered Aquila statues, old Martian crawler husks. They were cold and still. They had no fear, but Glory of Kal had no distinction between real and simulation. Targets were targets. The targeting array flared red. Valan's voice, calm and heavy with neural strain, passed through us. Fire. I hesitated, not out of doubt, but curiosity. I wanted to know if the voice would return. It didn't. Instead, the volcano cannon bucked. The blast split the ash-choked air with a roar so massive it erased all other sound. Fire and molten rock surged across the dead machines, turning them into silhouettes of slag and shadow. A second later, the recoil translated through the Titan's frame like thunder in the spine. Larek whispered, "You're late on response." I nodded. It won't happen again. But we both knew that was a lie, because even as the fire faded, and the echo of destruction died in the ruined valley, I could still feel it, that question lingering unanswered. Do you remember them? The sync held, but something had changed, and Glory of Kal knew it. The orbit of Kai's Prime shimmered with wreckage, fragments of station hulls, broken satellites, and the occasional drifting corpse in a burnt-out void suit. From the command deck of Glory of Kal, the descent was silent, but we could feel the tension radiating through the engine's limbs as atmospheric entry began. A Titan does not fear war. A Titan remembers it, and Glory of Kal remembered Kai's Prime. It had walked here once before. I sat with my breath held against the weight of the descent. Re-entry procedures were brutal. The pressure increased with every meter as gravity clawed us down into the ash-thick skies of a world being punished. From the Auspex arrays, Larek read out wind shear velocity and thermal bloom. Our drop zone was already marked by orbital lance strikes, white-hot scars carved into the crust of a once loyal hive city. Kai's Prime was supposed to be a simple reclamation, a minor uprising, pockets of secessionist Astra Militarum refusing to answer summons from Terra. But the kill quotas told a different story. Civilians outnumbered armed cells 3-1. That didn't stop the call for Titans. The Adeptus Mechanicus had deemed it a test case. Observe response under urban density. For them, it was data. For Glory of Cal, it was appetite. As we pierced the cloud layer, the hive city uncoiled beneath us like a necrotic wound. Once spires of marble and stained ferrocrete, now craters, fire pits, and broken bridges of melted plasteel. Vox traffic was chaos, screams layered beneath coded requests. One transmission looped every 13 seconds, begging for sanctuary. A child's voice, unintended, unnoticed. Valan stirred within the link coffin, his voice hoarse over the neurochannel. We begin with Hab Block Sigma. Resistance is confirmed. No one questioned it. The rites of ignition were already complete. Our first step crushed a manufactorum gate into powder. The second pulped 3 levels of residential overhang. Screams followed. Fleeing bodies registered as blips on the targeting display. They were unarmed, running. But the Auspex returned a different reality. Thermal spikes, Vox anomalies, possible last discharge echoes. Enough for justification. Enough for clean logs. The order came down like scripture. Weapons free. Larek locked targeting on a fleeing mass. Range calibrated, ready. My hands froze, not out of defiance, but because I heard it again. A moment, a blink, a delay. Valan's voice slammed through the neural link. Kairos! I complied. The volcano cannon fired. The blast erased half the block, stone, flesh, metal. It didn't matter. Everything dissolved into a rolling inferno that thundered down the causeway and vaporized the far wall. I saw figures caught mid-sprint, turned to silhouettes, then dust. And I felt the Titan. Savor it, not rage, not judgment. Satisfaction. And for the first time since my induction, I felt myself recoil from it. We advanced, step after thunderous step, through what remained of the quarter. My sensor feed showed all red, heat, motion, noise. No civilians, just obstructions. Valan marked targets like a man drawing breath. His neural rhythms barely changed. Larak never hesitated, but I did. Every time the machine spirit surged toward violence, I felt its will graze mine. It was not overpowering me, it was inviting me, testing me. That one was new. That one pierced deeper than it should have, because no one ever told me who Glory of Cal had lost. In theory, crews that failed in sync were rotated, reassigned, retired. In truth, most were never spoken of again. The names on the walls outside the command throne, half burnt, half forgotten, were the only testament, and something in the engine still mourned them, or devoured them. We moved toward the inner hive now. Block towers rose like shattered teeth around us. From the smoke, figures emerged. Not armed fighters, but robed pilgrims waving tattered banners. Children in tow, some carrying relics, others simply kneeling. The Auspex flagged them. Anomalous clustering. Possible Heretic ritual. Valan didn't blink. Exterminate. Larak marked targets. Confirmed. I hesitated again. This time the engine growled, not audibly, but I felt it in my spine. A tension in the cabling, a flicker in the sync. Warning. I thought of disconnecting, but there is no pause inside a Titan, only refusal, and that I was not yet ready for. I pulled the trigger. The banners burned first. The upper levels of the hive buckled under our steps. Glory of Cal didn't notice, or perhaps she simply didn't care. Beneath us, structural supports gave way like old bone. Glass shattered, statues collapsed. Vox towers bent sideways under the shockwaves of our passage. And somewhere amid the chaos, the last fragments of my belief in righteousness began to melt away. We had been told the secessionists were dug in deep, that they used the citizenry as meat shields. That purification was an act of mercy. But what I saw through the optic arrays was not war, it was slaughter. And every time I hesitated, every time my hand slowed on the weapon sync or my pulse faltered in the neural loop, I felt the machine grow impatient. Not Valan, not Larak, the engine, the Glory of Cal. It wanted more. Not because it was bloodthirsty, because it was designed to. because for thousands of years its only mode of expression was through annihilation. When it stepped onto a world, that world stopped resisting. Not out of diplomacy, but because nothing was left to resist. But today, it was not alone in its awareness. I was starting to feel it, too. In the deepest part of the link, where the control impulses blurred into instinct, I could feel something ancient and layered, not just the core mind of the Titan, but strata beneath it. Memories fossilized in steel and circuitry, echoes, laughs that didn't belong to us, screams, pleas, prayers, names. Too many to remember, and none I had ever heard aloud, and in all of it, one phrase repeating, not in words but in tone, in pressure, in neural impulse. I disengaged my secondary feedback line under the pretense of recalibration. My hands were shaking again, my chest tight. Larak didn't glance at me. He didn't have to. I knew what he was thinking. If I became a liability, the decision wouldn't be his. The princeps could isolate and override my connection, leave me paralyzed in my harness, a living servitor watching the war unfold through locked optics. Valan's voice returned to the chamber, steady and clear. Target Central Vox Spire. Enemy command node. That was the final strike. With that, Kai's prime would break. No communication, no command, no illusion of resistance. Larak confirmed range. Locked. But Valan didn't give the firing order. Not immediately. He turned his mind to mine inside the neural net. Moderati Fen, he said directly. Fire. I could feel him searching my intention like a hand in the dark, feeling for doubt, and the Titan was watching too, waiting. We stood amid a field of broken icons and molten stone, knee-deep in the ruin we had made. I breathed in, and then something changed. A pulse through the cortex, a spike in the interface, not pain, not malfunction memory, not mine. I was suddenly somewhere else, a vast red desert, not Kai's prime, a different world, a different age. I stood inside a Titan, this Titan, but the controls were different, simpler, the harness older, and the voice behind me was a woman's, laughing, not malicious, not cruel warm. It wasn't a hallucination, not a dream. It was a residue, a recorded moment from another life embedded in the circuits, not stored, not saved, imprinted. Then it was gone. I blinked, and I was back, still gripping the targeting controls, still seated in my throne, still expected to obey. And I did. I fired. The Vox Spire imploded with such force that for several seconds, the battlefield turned white. Dust rose to the clouds, fires danced across rooftops like spirits fleeing the pyre. The city died with a whisper. We stood still for a long time afterward. The kill confirmation registered. Kai's prime was pacified. Our mission complete. Valan leaned deeper into the neural link. I felt him more than heard him. You hesitated. I said nothing. Larak broke the silence. He still fired, Valan. Responded with a kind of silence I had never felt before. Contempt embedded in code. Then he spoke aloud for all to hear. Begin rite of recommitment. The words hit harder than any enemy shell. The rite was not a celebration. It was a realignment, a correction of mind and spirit, a ritualized purging of doubt, enforced by neural reconditioning, memory interrogation, and if necessary, partial lobotomy. It was rarely invoked, and never casually. The Magos. Preceptor acknowledged the order across Vox without comment. Kai's prime was over, but my war had just begun. The rite of recommitment was initiated before we left orbit. No ceremony, no blessing, just a terse directive from the Magos Preceptor and a change in the ambient lighting of the cortex chamber, amber to crimson. I remained in my throne, still half jacked into the neural net, sweat cooling on my skin in patches where the link ports hadn't quite disengaged. I could feel Glory of Cal's attention still lingering, like a lens unfocused but unblinking, as if she was watching the process too. Valan disconnected first. His pod drained slowly, the amniotic fluid hissing into reclamation tanks as mechadendrites retracted. He emerged slowly, deliberately, like a thing returning from the deep sea. His eyes met mine for a fraction of a moment. Not anger, not threat, just measurement, as if trying to decide if the flesh before him was still fit to wear the mask of duty. Larak said nothing, but remained wired in, overseeing telemetry and loop integrity. That was always his role, execution without emotion. The spine of the crew. If Valen was will and I was doubt, Larak was inevitability. 2 robed tech adepts entered the chamber. Their footsteps were barely audible beneath the humming chant of cogitator systems rebalancing after the engagement. They didn't speak, just approached me, each holding a sacred instrument, the echo lash and the scripture spike. Both tools of correction, not torture, not punishment, correction. That's how the Mechanicus framed it. My restraints tightened slightly. A reminder. I didn't resist. Resistance would be proof. I closed my eyes as the scripture spike pressed against my temple. Thin, sharp, not deep enough to pierce bone, but just far enough to anchor into the upper dermis and begin data extraction. Thoughts, reflexes, memory impulse. A biodump of the last 3 hours of cognitive function. The echo lash didn't strike. It sang, a thin, vibrating lash of monomolecular wire that danced across the air around me, its movement modulated by my pulse and brainwave fluctuations. Every time I thought of the child's voice on the repeating vox loop, it snapped. Every time I remembered the pilgrims in the ash, it whined in warning. Every moment of hesitation was punished, not by pain but by tone. Correction by resonance. It lasted less than 6 minutes, but I came out of it shaking, not from agony, from clarity, because something inside me had echoed back. When the scripture spike disengaged, it left behind a warmth, not blood but something deeper, and I swear I could hear it again. Through the neural fog, not from the machine spirit, not from Valan or Larek, but from the circuits themselves. I didn't ask who them referred to. I already knew. The previous crew, or the fragments of them, or the machine's approximation of their ghosts. Whatever they were not gone. Not entirely. Not while the engine still walked. Valan finally spoke, standing at the foot of my throne. "You will not hesitate again," he said. It wasn't a question. I nodded, but I did not speak. My throat was raw from clenching, and from silence. Larek looked over his shoulder. "He'll hold." Valan held my gaze. Then he turned and said, "Next theater, Vintergrav, cold front breach. 3 rotations, that was all. The rite was over. No benediction, no forgiveness, just the cold transition of function." I stood on numb legs and followed orders, but in the dim light of the cortex, behind the red glow of reprocessing optics and sacred runes, I knew something had changed. Not just in me. In Glory of Cal, the engine had accepted me, but not because I was obedient, because I had heard it. And that more than loyalty was dangerous because now it wasn't just the Titan speaking, it was listening. Vintergrav was not a world, it was a wound that never closed. From orbit, the ice stretched endlessly, veins of cobalt and ash running beneath a crust so thick even orbital lances could barely scar it. The storms never stopped, neither did the cold. Temperatures beyond the reach of most life clawed through armor plating and soaked into the bones. Even inside the Titan, the chill found us. It lived in the seams, in the breath between command syncs, in the silences between words. But it wasn't the cold that made Vintergrav different. It was the quiet. Kai's prime had screamed as it died. Cities, machines, people, all shouting into the void. But here everything was still, frozen. Like the world had stopped resisting a long time ago and simply decided to bury itself in the silence. We were not sent here for conquest. We were sent to clean up. The last remnants of the rebellion had fled across this tundra. No more cities, no orbital defense, just scattered convoys, makeshift shelters, bodies piled under glacial overhangs. The official order was extirpation, no ambiguity, nothing to reclaim. Valan barely spoke during approach. Larek kept Vox contact terse, focused on navigation. The atmosphere inside Glory of Cal had changed, quieter, more rigid. The machine spirit wasn't purring like it had on Kai's prime. It was waiting, like a predator, or like something that had returned to familiar ground. When we deployed onto the ice shelf, our first step cracked the surface for miles. It sounded like the planet groaned beneath us. Ice fissures opened in slow motion, revealing glacial crevasses deep enough to swallow hab blocks. Wind screamed over the ridge, peppering the carapace with ice crystals like tiny, frantic hands. I synced my auspex with thermal returns, scattered signatures, fleeing figures, weak engine pings. Survivors on foot targets. Valan issued the order like it was routine. Purge the perimeter. No survivors. We advanced, but Glory of Cal hesitated. Not much. Just a stutter in the left stride. A pause in targeting acquisition. Larek noticed first. Outrigger calibration error. Feeds looping, but I felt it before he did. It wasn't the leg. It wasn't the sensor array. It was the machine spirit. It didn't want to fire. Not yet. And that terrified me more than the cold, because I realized, with absolute certainty, that the Titan had begun to choose. The refugees ran across the ice in zigzag patterns, trying to make for the edge of a ravine. Some carried wounded, others just ran. No weapons, no Vox traffic, no threats. Our auspex flagged them anyway. I could feel Valon's growing frustration in the link. His mind press on the neural channel throbbed. His thoughts pulsed with irritation. He rerouted targeting commands through Larak, bypassed me, but the stutter remained. Then something else surfaced, deep in the neural thread. Just behind the optic relay, a memory, not mine. We lost one of them. We were warned. We didn't listen. I froze, not metaphorically, literally. My limbs locked, my fingers clenched. The neural link pulsed with static. The feedback almost forced a seizure. Maserati Fen is in neuro failure, Larak barked. Initiating override. But the override didn't engage. Because Glory of Cal overrode the override, the machine refused to disconnect me. Instead, it pushed deeper. Her voice is still here. My optic feed began to blur, but it wasn't the cold. I was seeing through someone else's last moment. Another crew, another campaign, another failure. The crevasse opened wide beneath us as we stepped closer to the fleeing group. One wrong move and they'd vanish into the void. One right move and they'd die screaming on the surface instead. Valon snapped through the link. Fire, now. But I didn't. Not because I resisted. Because she did. Glory of Cal turned her head away, slowly, deliberately. The cannon's targeting array refused to lock. The limbs trembled, not from malfunction, but from denial. Valon roared, and suddenly I felt it, his mind punching through the neural mesh like a drill, trying to seize control. The pain was immediate, 1,000-volt shock between thought and flesh. My vision went black, then red, then white, and then silence. When I came back to myself, the silence was absolute. No targeting glyphs, no auspex overlays, no link feedback, just the sound of my own breathing, ragged and loud inside the helmet's echo chamber. My hands were numb against the controls. I looked up. We had stopped moving. The Titan had powered down mid-stride. Impossible. Even during cooldown or prayer cycle, Glory of Cal never halted unless commanded. But now her systems lay dormant, humming faintly as if caught in contemplation, like a creature holding its breath. Valon was screaming into the neural net, but I couldn't hear him. Not completely. The link had fractured. Not broken, just refused. His voice faded like echoes underwater, tinny and far off. Larak tried to engage manual override. His station flared with input, but nothing responded. The engine had withdrawn, and I understood it wasn't a malfunction, it was deliberate. Glory of Cal was locking them out. Not out of rebellion, out of protection. I was still connected, barely, not in command. Not controlling, but witnessing. Deep in the core of the interface, I drifted in neural stasis. Not asleep, not awake, somewhere in between. The space where memory and machine blended. And there, in the silence beneath the ice, I saw it. Not physically, but as a construct. Fragments stitched together by the machine spirit. Old corridors, broken thrones, voices, faces I didn't recognize. Voices not mine, whispering prayers in languages I didn't speak. Crew members long dead. Some smiling, some screaming, some just silent, and at the center of it all, her, a woman in command robes. Pale hair bound in a right knot. Her hands hovered over a control panel I recognized instantly. Glory of Cal's original array, centuries older, smoother, unmarred by retrofits. She was singing softly, not a battle hymn but a lullaby. I couldn't hear the words, but the melody was warm. She turned to me, her mouth didn't move, but I understood her. You will not be the last, I tried to speak, to ask who she was, what had happened, why the machine refused. She only raised a hand, pointed to something behind me. I turned and saw the moment, the last time the Titan had been here, a memory etched in code and pain. The ice was newer then, blue instead of gray. The crew was different, 5 in the chamber. No Valon, no Larak, no me, and yet familiar. Echoes of gestures, similarities in rhythm. They were tracking insurgents, same patterns, same footprints, same cliff, and then misfire. One of the weapon systems glitched, fired early, The cliff collapsed. They all fell, not into a crevasse, but into the Titan's mind. Their deaths weren't instant. The neural sync had been partially active. Their last thoughts, fear, shame, fleeting, had imprinted, and the machine had never forgotten. The lullaby had been the last voice it heard, the voice it now protected. I snapped back to awareness. The cockpit glowed dimly. Larek had powered down his console, sitting still, staring at nothing. Valon's coffin pulsed with restrained fury, but he too was motionless, cut off. Only I remained engaged, and the refugees, gone, vanished into the storm. The ice swallowing their trail. We had let them. Gono Glory of Kal had let them go, and now it was waiting, not for confirmation, not for forgiveness, but for acknowledgement. Reached out, not with hands, but with thought, not words, just emotion. The system hummed. One by one, the lights returned. Targeting systems reinitialized. Auspex resynced. Motion stabilizers recalibrated. The Titan breathed again, but something was different. She had changed, or rather, she had revealed what she had always been. Not a weapon, a witness. Valon reconnected seconds later. His thoughts were sharp, jagged, controlled only by command discipline. What happened? He didn't direct it at me. He asked the room. The silence that answered him was not empty. It was full. Larak glanced at me. He knew. He didn't understand all of it, but he had felt the shift. We had a sync disruption, I said flatly. I stabilized it. It was a lie, but a useful one. Valon grunted. No deviation recorded in final logs, he muttered. We proceed. No mention of delay. He didn't want a report. He wanted control, and control, he now knew, was not absolute because the engine had chosen, and it had chosen not to kill. Not this time. As we turned from the ravine and moved back toward extraction coordinates, I felt it one last time, faint, soft, like a fading pulse behind my ribs, and that was enough. For now. It began with silence. Not the silence of empty rooms or frozen battlefields. This was different, a silence that pressed inward, that folded across your thoughts and pinned them down, the kind of silence that arrives just before revelation. And on the return flight from Wintergrav, buried deep within the subhold of the Mechanicus Arc vessel Divine Transactor, that silence took shape in the form of an audit. Not from the Munitorum. Not from a rival Legio. From within, Magos Preceptor Hallex entered the Cortex chamber without fanfare. His face was partially obscured by ritual lenses, his breath slow and deliberate through a Vox modulator tuned to subharmonic prayer. Behind him, 3 red-robed data clerics floated on grav sleds, each carrying a reliquary filled with sensorium logs. The logs from Wintergrav, from Kai's Prime, from me. I would speak with the crew, Hallex said. Valon rose first, still wet from immersion, his posture stiff, movements deliberate. A veteran of a dozen campaigns and twice that many rite of discipline boards. He said nothing, but his presence filled the room like a servo engine starting up. Larek remained seated, cleaning dust from his auspex with the end of a cloth inscribed in binary ink. His eyes flicked to me once, nothing more. And I sat in the dark, the link coil still half bound to my skull, pretending not to hear the whispering beneath the machine's skin. Hallex approached Glory of Kal with something approaching reverence, but lacking affection, like a priest who knows his god can lie. Titan 434 Kal has demonstrated unorthodox latency, he began, his hands moving in slow Mechanicus litanies. Desynchronization, refusal of certain targeting commands, spiritual non-compliance. We require clarity, Valon responded coldly. Neural feedback remained within operational variance. No cause for excommunication or transfer. Hallex's lenses rotated with an audible tick. Our data sieves disagree. A pause. Then, he turned to me. You were the point of fracture. I didn't deny it. Instead, I asked, do you know who the last princeps was? That stopped him, only for a second. Then he answered, records sealed. Of course they were. He stepped closer. His breath fogged slightly in the chill of the cortex chamber. You made contact, didn't you? My jaw locked. Not because I feared discipline, because I knew what would happen if I told the truth. They would erase me, or worse, disconnect me, keep me alive and force me to watch as they stripped Glory of Kal apart in the name of purity. I said nothing. But behind me, Glory of Kal moved, just a shudder. Servo one breath. The chamber lights flickered. Hallex took a step back. She's awake. Larak finally spoke. Quietly. She's been awake. Hallex turned to him. You knew? Larak's voice was cold. I didn't want to know. But I saw it. Valan's hand gripped the side of the coffin. We are not theologians. We are Titan crew. What we believe is irrelevant. What matters is that we fire when told. But even he looked uncertain now. Hallex looked up into the skull visage of Glory of Cal, and his voice softened. There are legends, he said. Rumors that Titans over centuries, over millennia begin to remember. Not just commands, not just movements, people, echoes, their crews. That if a sync is strong enough, it leaves a residue. And eventually, those residues congeal, Valan scoffed. Stories told to frighten initiates. Hallex's voice did not waver. I've seen a Titan weep. Silence. Then he turned to me again. What did she show you? I almost answered. Almost. But before I could, Glory of Cal interrupted. Not with sound, not with movement, but with data. A sudden flood into every console. Every relay, every cogitator, images, sounds, neural logs, overlapping memories, faces, laughter, screams, lullabies, a full communion, shared across every link node in the chamber. Even the Magos staggered, even Valan flinched. And I saw her again, the woman from the memory, her hands on the controls, her voice soft, her command absolute. She looked directly at me through the stream. And then, at all of us. The data stream ended not with a rupture, but a breath. A long exhaled silence like a cathedral finally emptied of pilgrims. Glory of Cal fell still once more, her systems returning to standby, lights fading back to a deep ceremonial crimson. But the chamber was forever changed. We had not simply observed memory, we had shared it, not as viewers, as participants. We had entered something sacred, and it had entered us back. Hallex stood frozen, lenses spinning erratically, his fingers twitching in a half-completed rite. For a moment I feared his mind had fractured under the weight of communion, but then he spoke and his voice trembled, not with fear but awe. She remembers. Valan stepped forward, fists clenched at his sides, his neural sync still faintly glowing around his temples. This is heresy, he growled. Machine spirits do not evolve, they obey. They are tools. Consecrated, yes, but controlled. Larak didn't speak. He didn't need to. His silence was agreement. Hallex's voice was almost a whisper now. What if we were wrong? What if the Omnissiah does not only reside within the engine, but listens through it? What if every voice ever linked into this throne has lingered? Valan snapped. You're saying this Titan is alive? No, Hallex said, shaking his head slowly. I'm saying it's remembering how to become alive. That was the moment I understood the truth. Glory of Cal was not sentient in the way we understood, not conscious like a human, or calculating like a noospheric AI. She was a composite, a structure of echoes, a library of lives etched into neural steel. Every princeps, every moderati, every magos who ever linked with her left behind traces, fragments of thought, reflex, emotion. The sum of centuries, pressed down, compacted, layered, and now, the layers were waking. Valan turned to me. You let this happen. I didn't deny it. Because I had. Because from the first moment she whispered, I listened, and she knew. That knowledge, shared silently between us, gave me strength. So when Valan raised his hand to declare me unfit, to call for my immediate removal and ritual purging, I acted, not with violence, with truth. Check the combat logs, I said. Check the telemetry from Kai's Prime, from Vintergrav. Every delay, every hesitation, every aborted strike. Every one of them spared someone, civilians, pilgrims, wounded, not one mistake. No stumbles, no risk to the mission, Valan sneered. Sentiment, weakness, precision, I said. She's not disobeying. She's choosing better. Hallex stepped between us now, the red fringe of his robe trailing like blood. We have precedent, he said. Titans that resist commands, that reject crews, but this is communion. Larak finally spoke, his voice low. If we report this to Mars, they'll decommission her. Dissect her, I added. Erase everything that makes her what she is. And they'll do the same to us. A silence fell again, this time darker. The Mechanicus tolerated anomalies. They did not tolerate mystery. Valan exhaled through clenched teeth. "What do you propose?" And that was the moment, the hinge point, the fulcrum of trust, of shared guilt, of dangerous clarity. "We lie," I said. The word hung like heresy, but Hallex didn't flinch. He nodded. "We submit redacted logs. Remove the refusal pings. Normalize the fire lag. Filter emotional overlays. Replace all communion signatures with static anomalies." Valen turned away. He didn't agree, but he didn't object. Larak, for once, looked directly at me. "You'll carry the blame if they find it," I smiled. "No, she will." And Glory of Cal, half asleep in the chamber around us, pulsed once through the deck beneath our feet. A low thrum, not protest, not warning, acknowledgement. We left the cortex chamber one by one. No orders, no further prayers, just silence. A silence that now meant we are not alone in here anymore. That night, in the silence of my bunk aboard the Divine Transactor, I felt something stir across the neural scar at the base of my skull. Not pain, not fear. A whisper. I closed my eyes and whispered back. 3 weeks later, Glory of Cal stood beneath the red suns of Necreon's reach, motionless on the edge of a barren plateau, like a saint fallen from myth. Her armor had been repainted in the livery of Shadow Campaign compliance, her heraldry reconsecrated by tech priests who knew nothing of what she had become. The crew assigned to her, Valen, Larak, and I, remained unchanged, but everything else was a carefully curated illusion, a lie, sculpted in sacred code and false logs, fed directly into the Martian noosphere. The Mechanicus audit passed without notice. On record, Glory of Cal had performed admirably on Kai's Prime and Vintergrav, all targeting sequences clean, all emotional logs stable, no recorded latency, no spiritual deviation, one of a dozen Titans reaffirmed as holy war assets of the Collegia Titanica. But she, and we, knew better. The truth was folded into silence. Every memory of communion hidden behind layers of encryption, only we understood how to read. We had written a gospel no priest would dare recite, and the Titan kept her secret. But secrets, even sacred ones, have a way of breathing. During calibration on the edge of Necreon's reach, I noticed something strange in the Auspex returns. Not a fault, not an anomaly, a pattern, a repeating waveform hidden beneath the thermal noise. A phrase, perhaps, or a name. At first I thought it was residue from the communion, but the pattern wasn't from the past. It was new, ongoing. Glory of Cal was speaking again. Not to me this time. To herself. I approached. Larak, quietly during a refit cycle. She's thinking. He didn't look up from the Auspex relay. She's always thinking. No, I mean, she's processing. His hand paused. She's evolving. It wasn't a question. I nodded. She's becoming something. Larak finally met my eyes. We made her that way. He wasn't wrong. Or maybe she always was that way. And we simply cleared the ash from her voice. Valan, for his part, never addressed the communion again. Not directly. He performed rites with machine-perfect precision, recited catechisms, executed targeting drills. But he never linked with the engine as long or as deeply as before. Something had changed in him, not fear, not reverence, distance. As if he feared that if he stared into the soul of Glory of Cal again, it would stare back, and now it would recognize him. On the 22nd day of station keeping, a request came from the Mechanicus archive fleet. Submit a full noospheric playback of emotional telemetry from Vintergrav. The lie had worked, until now. A small discrepancy in the data had triggered a minor review. A glitch, perhaps. A timestamp out of place. Enough for some red-robed archivist on Mars to raise a data flag. Enough to unravel everything. We gathered in the cortex chamber. No chanting. No incense. Just quiet fear. Larak leaned over his console. We can falsify again. Build a clean stream. But if they run a deep cross-check, they'll know, I said. Valan stood at the Titan's feet, staring up into her blank eye ports. We could burn the logs entirely. Hallex, now quietly listed in our manifest as liturgical engineer, stepped forward. And trigger a full purity investigation? Every cog would be scanned, every memory core, every mind. There were no good options, and then the console lit up on its own. Not an alert, not a warning, just a pulse. A query. We stared at the screen. The Titan was asking, not demanding, offering. Valan's jaw clenched. What happens if we say yes? I don't know, I whispered. Halleck stepped forward, almost reverent now. Maybe. She writes the lie for us. We looked at one another. Then slowly I reached for the console and accepted. The playback stream compiled in real time. Data packets arranged themselves in perfect alignment. Emotional readings shifted by fractional degrees, syncing with battle rhythm. Targeting justification reconstructed. Firing logs clean. Sync variance reduced to Imperial norms. A perfect echo of what should have happened, not what had. The perfect lie, written by the machine herself. We watched in silence as the report uploaded. The confirmation came moments later. No anomaly detected. Case closed. And just beneath that line, as if signed in a whisper. The next morning, Valan requested a private sync. It was unheard of. A princeps never linked without the full crew present. Not just for safety, but for balance. Neural strain required distribution. Too much feedback in one node, and the psyche could fracture. But he insisted, said it was for alignment. To understand what we've become. Halleck approved it. Barely. I stood just outside the Cortex chamber when it happened. Helmet off. The cold of the command hall pressing against my skin like a warning. Inside, Valan lay in the link throne, alone in the dark. Glory of Cal was quiet, save for the faint hum of her inner core. No prayers, no code, just presence. The sync initiated, first slowly, then all at once. For 42 seconds. Everything held. Then his scream shattered the air. It wasn't a scream of pain. It was a scream of recognition. We rushed in. Valan's body convulsed in the fluid chamber. Neural sparks licked at the throne's edge. His eyes wide open, pupils dilated, hands clutching at nothing. He was speaking, but the words weren't his. They weren't even words, just syllables carried from another voice, another age. Then silence. The link broke. Valan slumped forward. Alive, breathing, but changed. When his eyes met mine, there was nothing cold left in them, no command, only understanding. She showed me. All of them, he whispered. Every crew, every voice. All the ones who stayed, all the ones who couldn't. Larak watched him with something between pity and fear. Hallex only bowed. She chose you, he said. Valen shook his head. No, she chose us. That night, for the first time since Kai's prime, we sat together as a crew. No helmets, no rights, no fear, just silence, and the faint glow of Glory of Cal resting in her vault. Hallex spoke of the theoretical rites of deep communion, rituals lost to time, considered myth by the higher orders of Mars, scripts so ancient they were considered heretical not because they failed, but because they worked. Larak, ever the cynic, asked the question no one wanted to voice. How long before they notice? Hallex didn't blink. They already have. They just haven't admitted it. I looked up at Glory of Cal then, and I knew. She wasn't hiding anymore. She was waiting for the next step, for what she would become, for what we would become, because communion was never the end, it was the beginning, and somewhere, deep inside her armored heart, below steel and relic and code and memory, something had begun to pulse. A new thought, a new voice, one that wasn't made of echoes, one that had never spoken before. Ours. Final epilogue beat, 100 words. Years later, when the Glory of Cal was finally retired, her frame too worn to fight, her reactors too slow to purge, we buried her in a vault. Cathedral on a moon no one remembered. They say the sarcophagus thrums at night, that the chamber walls hum with voices, that if you sit long enough beside her throne and close your eyes, you'll hear them. The ones who stayed, the ones who heard, the ones who whispered back.